1958. Hollywood. A gun was pointed at Sean Connery's face. The man holding it was Johnny Stompanato, one of the most dangerous mobsters in Los Angeles. And he had one message: stay away from Lana Turner, or I'll kill you. Sean Connery looked him dead in the eye and said something that would become legend. But before we get to that moment, before we understand why that gun never fired, you need to know who Sean Connery really was. Because the man the world knew as James Bond was forged in a place where survival wasn't about martinis and tuxedos. It was about fists, hunger, and a rage that refused to die. Edinburgh, Scotland, 1930. Sean Connery was born in Fountainbridge, one of the most brutal slums in Europe. His father, Joseph, drove a truck for pennies. His mother, Euphemia, scrubbed floors in rich people's homes. They lived in a tenement building where 8 families shared one toilet. There was no running water in their flat, no bathroom, no heating. In winter, Sean and his younger brother slept in the same bed, just to stay warm. His mother wrapped newspapers around their bodies as insulation. This wasn't poverty. This was survival. Sean's first memory was hunger. Real, gnawing, constant hunger. His mother would water down the soup to make it last longer. His father would come home exhausted, smelling of diesel and defeat. There were nights when there was no food at all, just silence, just the cold, just the understanding that tomorrow would be exactly the same. Sean learned early that the world didn't care if you lived or died, and that lesson carved itself into his bones. At 13, Sean dropped out of school. Not because he was stupid, because his family was starving. He got a job delivering milk. Every morning at 5:30, he loaded heavy glass bottles onto a cart and dragged them through the freezing streets of Edinburgh. Rain, snow, wind. It didn't matter. The milk had to be delivered. His hands were raw. His back ached constantly. He was a child doing a man's work, and he was paid almost nothing. At night, he worked in a furniture shop, polishing coffins. He hated it. The smell of wood varnish, the silence, the constant reminder that death was the only escape most people ever got. He would stare at those coffins and think, is this it? Is this all there is? But Sean Connery wasn't like most people. He had something burning inside him, a refusal, a defiance, a belief that he was meant for something more, even if he didn't know what. At 15, he lied about his age and joined the Royal Navy. He thought the military would save him, give him structure, purpose, a way out. For 3 years, he served. But the Navy didn't save him. It broke him. The stress, the rigid discipline, the crushing realization that he was still just a number triggered severe stomach ulcers. The doctors said if he didn't leave, it would kill him. So at 18, he was discharged, medically unfit. He returned to Edinburgh with nothing, no skills, no qualifications, no future. He was right back where he started, and it was killing him. But Sean Connery refused to accept it. He started lifting weights, obsessively, every day. He couldn't control his life, but he could control his body. He trained until his muscles screamed, until his hands bled, until he became something different, something harder. He entered bodybuilding competitions. He didn't win, but people noticed. They noticed the intensity, the hunger in his eyes. One day, a theater director saw him and said, "You should try acting." Sean had no training, no education. He could barely read. But he was desperate, so he said yes. His first audition was a disaster. He forgot his lines. He was stiff, awkward, terrified. The director told him he had no talent, but Sean came back, again, and again. He started reading Shakespeare, Ibsen, Chekhov. He would sit in his tiny room speaking the words out loud, trying to understand them. He watched other actors, studied their movements, their voices. He was teaching himself how to become someone else. Because being Sean Connery, the milkman from Edinburgh, wasn't enough. For years, he struggled. He played nameless soldiers, background extras, corpses, roles so small they didn't even have lines. He was 25 years old, living in a one-room flat in London, surviving on bread and tea, wondering if he'd made a terrible mistake. But then something shifted. He started getting better roles, small but noticeable. A detective, a soldier with lines, a leading man in a forgettable film. And in 1957, he got a call. Hollywood wanted him. It wasn't a big role, just another film. But it was Hollywood, the dream, the escape. Sean packed everything he owned into a single suitcase and flew to Los Angeles. And that's where his life changed forever, because that's where he met Lana Turner. Lana Turner was a goddess, one of the biggest stars in the world. She had been in movies since she was 16. She was beautiful, wealthy, untouchable. But she was also deeply, tragically broken. She had been married 7 times. Each marriage ended in disaster. She was attracted to dangerous men, men who hurt her, men who controlled her. And when she met Sean Connery, she saw something in him, something raw, something real. They started seeing each other. It wasn't love, it was attraction, chemistry, a distraction. But in Hollywood, nothing stays secret. And Lana Turner had a shadow. His name was Johnny Stompanato. Johnny Stompanato was a gangster, not the charming movie kind, the real kind. He worked for Mickey Cohen, one of the most feared crime bosses in America. Johnny was handsome, well-dressed, and absolutely violent. He beat Lana regularly. He threatened her, controlled her money, isolated her from friends. But Lana couldn't leave. She was terrified of him. When Johnny found out Lana was spending time with Sean Connery, he didn't just get angry, he got murderous. One night, Johnny showed up at Sean's apartment. He didn't knock. He kicked the door open. Sean was inside, alone. Johnny walked in with a gun, a real gun, loaded. He pointed it at Sean's chest and said, "You touch her again, and I'll kill you. I'll blow your fucking head off." Most men would have begged. Most men would have promised to stay away. Most men would have done anything to make that gun disappear. Sean Connery stared at him, silent, unmoving. And then he said the words that would define him. "You want to shoot me? Then shoot me. But if you don't, put that gun down and fight me like a man." Johnny Stompanato froze. He had threatened hundreds of people, politicians, businessmen, actors. They all folded. But Sean Connery didn't move, didn't blink, didn't show a single sign of fear. And in that moment, Johnny realized he had made a mistake, because Sean Connery wasn't afraid to die. And a man with nothing to lose is the most dangerous man in the world. Johnny lowered the gun, not because he wanted to, because he had to. He backed out of the room. He left. But the story spread like wildfire. Within days, everyone in Hollywood knew. Sean Connery faced down Johnny Stompanato. Unarmed, unflinching, unafraid, the legend was born. But here's what nobody knew. 2 months later, Johnny Stompanato was dead, stabbed to death, by Lana Turner's 14-year-old daughter, Cheryl. Johnny had come to Lana's house in a rage. He was screaming, threatening to kill her, to disfigure her face. Cheryl heard everything. She grabbed a kitchen knife and walked into the room, and she stabbed him. Once, in the stomach. Johnny Stompanato bled out on Lana Turner's bedroom floor. The court ruled it justifiable homicide, self-defense, but Sean Connery never spoke about it, not once. He carried that night with him. The night a loaded gun was pointed at his face, the night he refused to beg, the night that almost killed him. Because that encounter changed Sean. It made him colder, harder, more distant. He realized how fragile life was, how close he came to losing everything. One bullet, one wrong word, and his entire future would have been erased. He never let anyone get that close again. Not emotionally, not physically. He built walls, high walls, and they stayed up for the rest of his life. 3 years later, in 1962, Sean Connery was cast as James Bond, the role that would make him immortal. The producers wanted someone dangerous, someone who could kill you with a smile, someone who looked like he had stared down death and won. They found Sean Connery, and the world fell in love with him. Dr. No was a sensation. From Russia with Love made him a superstar. Goldfinger made him a legend. Sean Connery became the most famous man on the planet. But Sean Connery hated James Bond. He hated the character. He hated the fame. He hated that no matter what he did, people only saw 007. He tried to quit after every film. But the studio wouldn't let him. They offered more money, more pressure, more control. He was trapped. The role that made him a legend became his prison. And the rage that saved him from Johnny Stompanato started to consume him from the inside. He would show up to set drunk. He fought with directors. He insulted journalists. He became difficult, angry, impossible. People said he was arrogant, ungrateful. But Sean wasn't arrogant. He was suffocating. He was the most famous actor in the world, and he felt like a slave. He once said, "I am not James Bond. James Bond is a tool I use to make money." But the world didn't care. They wanted Bond, not Sean. In 1971, Sean finally escaped. He quit. He walked away from millions of dollars. He moved to Spain. He started doing smaller films, character roles, films that let him act, not just pose. And slowly, he started to find himself again. He met Micheline Roquebrune, a French-Moroccan painter. She was different, strong, independent. She didn't care that he was James Bond. She saw Sean, the real Sean. They got married in 1975. And for the first time in his life, Sean Connery felt like he could breathe. But the damage was done. The years of rage, the years of pressure, the years of pretending to be someone he wasn't, had carved scars deep into his soul. He became obsessed with privacy. He refused interviews. He moved to the Bahamas, far from Hollywood. He built a life where nobody could touch him. But he couldn't escape his own mind. In his 70s, Sean started forgetting things. Small things at first, names, dates, where he put his keys. Micheline noticed, but Sean refused to admit it. "He's just getting old," people said. "It's normal." But it wasn't normal. It was dementia. And it was slowly, cruelly, erasing the man who had survived everything. By his 80s, Sean Connery didn't know who he was anymore. He would wake up confused. He didn't recognize his own house. Sometimes he didn't recognize Micheline, the woman he had loved for 45 years. She would hold his hand and say, "It's me. It's Micheline." And he would look at her like she was a stranger. The man who stared down a mobster. The man who became the greatest spy in cinema history. The man who refused to be afraid was gone. And what remained was a shadow. On October 31st, 2020, Sean Connery died in his sleep. He was 90 years old. Micheline was by his side. But Sean wasn't there. Not really. The disease had taken him years before his body gave out. And here's the tragedy. The world mourned James Bond, the tributes, the headlines, the montages. But Sean Connery never wanted to be James Bond. He wanted to be Sean, the boy from Edinburgh, the milkman, the fighter, the man who refused to beg. But the world never let him. And here's what haunts me about his story. The gun Johnny Stompanato pointed at him that night in 1958, it never fired. But the gun Hollywood aimed at him, that one never stopped shooting. For 60 years, it fired. Slowly, quietly. Every interview, every premiere. Every time someone called him Bond instead of Sean. That gun was always pointed at his soul, and in the end, it killed him. Not his body, but the man inside. That's the real story of Sean Connery. Not the movies, not the fame, not the legend, but the boy who delivered milk in the freezing rain. The man who faced a loaded gun and refused to blink. The man who fought his entire life just to be seen as something more than a character. He won that fight against Johnny Stompanato, but he lost the fight against himself, because the greatest prison isn't made of bars, it's made of expectations. And Sean Connery spent his whole life trying to break free, and he never did.